So the third half-hour presentation this morning is about data management tools. So this is more not so much what is your application doing, but how do you take care of your data once you've generated it or once you've obtained it from wherever you're getting your data from. And this presentation is a little different because I'm sort of teaching you about tools that I'm not so much involved in, but hopefully I'll do them justice and kind of giving you an introduction. But of course, efficiently accessing your data is only part of the problem. You've got to take care of your data and preserve it. Do good stewardship of your data. And I'm going to talk about two generic tasks that you might do most anywhere and will likely have common tools most anywhere for how to do it. The first is archiving data. So this is particularly if you have some supercritical data. You've made your molecular dynamics simulation, you've got a really cool result, and you want to make sure it doesn't get lost. Archiving is one way to protect it and make sure that it has long-term protection. You can also just archive data if you just run out of space. These storage systems are really, really big, but they're not infinite. And you probably have a quota that will stop you from using up the whole storage system. So at some point, you're going to have to make some hard decisions and either delete data, move it somewhere, or archive it. The second thing is transferring data. So this, there can be a lot of reasons for moving data around. You may just want to share it with your collaborators. You might have some data that you produced at one place, but there's tools somewhere else for analyzing it, and there's tools somewhere else for doing something else with it. So you've got to move it around. Or maybe you're acquiring data from somewhere, like an experimental source, a telescope or a collider or something, and you've got to get it to where the compute is so you can work on it. So I'm going to talk about kind of general things you can do for archiving your data and for moving it around. So we'll talk about archiving first. It's a big job. And as I was saying, if you run out of space or you want to just preserve something for a long time, this is what you're going to turn to. All the big DOE facilities have a gigantic tape capability. And I've got a picture. This picture is a few years old, but this is from the facility at NERSC. And what's in a tape archive system is not just a box with some tapes in it. There's actually many thousands of tapes, many, many petabytes, hundreds of petabytes probably at least of tape storage ability. And they have a bunch of controllers that can read a bunch of these tapes simultaneously. And they have robots. That's what this guy is here. Robot shoots down this column of tapes and pulls one out and goes and sticks it in the drive to read stuff off of it. And this is an enormous kind of organizing problem and keeping things working together at the same time problem. So you can look at this picture of this robot in this warehouse of tapes and imagine this could be really complicated and hard to use, but people work really hard at making it not be so. So fortunately for us, most sites use something called HPSS. HPSS isn't perfect, but it's pretty standard and it does a good job of organizing all these tapes and accessing them. So overview of what HPSS is. It was developed by IBM and the Department of Energy to kind of, particularly for this problem. This isn't the same thing you would use for like home backups or whatever. It's really meant for big HPC facilities. And because of that, it interfaces with a lot of different things. It'll connect to a lot of tools. It can connect to, big data, cloud stuff. It can connect to HPC systems, your laptop, whatever. And it's meant to scale and store a lot of data. And to do this, it's not just a bunch of tapes. There's databases that index where all the tapes are and what's on them. So when you go back to find a piece of information, you can find it. There's some disk arrays that cache data because the tapes are a little slow. Maybe you want to spool up some things on some hard drives and not wait around for it to actually get literally onto a magnetic tape somewhere. And it ties into Globus. We'll talk about Globus in a minute, but this is, you can actually even get stuff straight off an archive and take it to another site. Most of the sites that have deployed HPSS have some documentation that's particular to their site. How they recommend using it where you are. And there's HPSS has been around for a long time. There's a lot of different tools. The one I would encourage you to look at first if you're getting started with it is HSI. to get it. It's just like Darshan on most systems. You're going to do a module load HSI, or maybe it's already there. And to use HSI, you can run commands with it in a script. So you can say HSI put blah, 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 HSI get blah, blah, blah. Or you can just type HSI and hit return, and it'll give you like a terminal where you can interact with the archive system. So we'll look at that because that's a little easier to kind of understand than just looking at scripts. So if you do this, this is from Theta. You log on, you do a module load HSI to get the HSI tool. You type HSI and hit return, and it gives you something that looks like a login prompt, but it's for the tape archive system, and it tells you the version number and a few things. But then you have a prompt, and you can type commands, HSI commands, to interact with the archive. And I'm not an expert in HPSS, but I can show you some of the basic things. But the put command, as you might think, puts something in the archive. You can do ls just like you would in a normal file system and see a listing of what's in there. So I'm a heavy archive user. I've got notes.txt in there. I hope it's safe. When you're done, you type quit, and you get back to your normal command prompt. And that's really that's about it as far as the basics. So put stores a file. You can do a -R to make it recursive, so you can store a whole directory tree in there. When you want to retrieve it back and put it back in your working directory, the get command is what you use to pull something out of the archive and get it back where it's supposed to be. Access to HPSS is, you should think of it as an extra privilege beyond simply having an account on the system. So if you go to use HSI and it doesn't work, it won't let you access the archive, just contact support and say, hey, I'm doing this cool stuff. I want to save some data. Let me access the archive, and they'll turn it on for you. They just may not necessarily turn it on automatically for all types of accounts. There is a caveat today, though. Unfortunately, so most of you, I hope, have guest accounts at the ALCF to interact with Theta and Mira. HPSS is not turned on for the guest accounts. If you think about it, this makes sense because they don't want temporary accounts to put permanent data on the system that they can't easily get back out. So you're not going to be able to use HSI with a guest account. If you have a normal account, or if you have an account at another facility that has HPSS, you can play with it and ask us questions. I'll give one warning here too. If you look at documentation for HPSS, the first two tools they usually talk about are the one that I mentioned, HSI, and there's another one called HTAR. The short story is don't use HTAR. It's bad news. So there's some problems in there. Can't handle long paths, can't handle certain file sizes, just don't use it. Try and figure out how to do what you're going to do with HSI, or maybe find another interface if you need something different. So the second thing I want to talk about with data management is how to move data around. This is tough because, as you guys know, if you're working with scientific data, it's usually quite big, gigabytes, terabytes, or maybe even petabytes. And so if you want to take something that's at one facility and move it to another facility, it's not always straightforward. You can't necessarily do the easy thing. But one thing that helps quite a bit is the Department of Energy has a dedicated network that it's put out that connects a lot of different facilities, not just DOE facilities, but also some other resources as well. And universities and so forth can tap into this network. But it's called the Energy Sciences Network. And it's just like the internet. In fact, you don't know if you're on that or the internet. You don't do anything special to get on it other than just go between two sites that are on it. But it has dedicated, very high performance links between these facilities that help you move big data sets. It's meant for that purpose. And of course, Argonne's on there. That's the star up there at the kind of top middle. So, like I said, it looks like the internet. If you're logged on to an Argonne machine and from there you log on to a NERSC or Oak Ridge or whatever machine, it won't look any different than using the normal internet. That also means you can use any tool over it that you would on the internet. You can S-copy things if you're used to using SSH and that sort of thing. You can FTP things if someone has FTP open somewhere, I guess. Or use whatever you're used to, and it will work. Because it's just a regular internet network. The problem is those kinds of tools that you might use for copying little files around yourself are going to be really, really slow for moving a terabyte weather data set. It's going to take forever. Those tools just aren't meant to move big data sets from big storage systems across these fast links. So what do? We're going to, again, there's a lot of tools available, but the one that's most widely used and kind of easiest to use and most likely to work is Globus. We're going to talk about Globus. So what is Globus? They're not just a data transfer tool. They're considered a data management service that can do other things. So you can use them to transfer files between sites. You can share files with collaborators or specific collaborators or the public at large. You can publish things. And most HPC facilities are tied into Globus somehow. The degree to which they've dedicated resources to this might vary, but most are on Globus, or you can even use your laptop or whatever. There's nothing magical about getting on Globus except that a lot of sites have set up resources that will really help you use Globus better. There's a web service, a web page you can go to and log into and interact with it, or you can use command line tools. We're going to talk about the web service today because that's kind of more intuitive, but for the most part, the most important thing I'm going to tell you about is that you can use Globus to set up third-party transfers between two sites. And what I mean by third-party is, suppose I'm here in the room and I want to move something between Argonne and Lawrence Berkeley. I can set up that transfer in Globus, and it's going to go straight from Argonne to Lawrence Berkeley. It's not going to go from Argonne to this room to Lawrence Berkeley. That's really important if you want to stay on these fast networks. It'll restart the transfer if it gets interrupted. Sometimes the internet breaks, so does ESNet, but it'll start it back up if there's a problem. It'll validate the data, make sure that what you had on one end is the same as what you had on the other, that nothing got corrupted. And a critical thing, and this is kind of one of the things that really differentiates Globus, is that it can span authentication systems. So as you guys are aware, if you have an account at one site with one username and you have an account at the other site, whether it's the same username or not, they're not the same. You've got different passwords or tokens or whatever you're using. So Globus can help cross that and make sure you get things from one place to another. And there's documentation at the sites, and we're going to talk about the web interface here for a few minutes. So if you go to www.globus.org, it's the same website for anyone. It's not specific to your site. You can log in using a bunch of different credentials. So this is a drop-down box. If you click that, there's going to be a whole list of organizations. And you find one that you're a member of already, and you can log in using whatever authentication method that organization uses. So if you pick Argonne LCF, you're going to pull out your token and press the button on it and type in the numbers, just like you would log in onto the system. If you don't have accounts at any of those kind of member sites, you can log in with Google account, or you can even make an account at Globus, I guess. But at any rate, you log in, and if you have accounts at multiple sites, you can connect those so that it knows that when Carns at A&L logs in, that's the same thing as Carns at Lawrence Berkeley, or Carns at Gmail or whatever. It knows that you're one person, even though you may have multiple accounts. So once you've gotten logged in, however you're going to log in, you're probably going to come to a screen that's called endpoints. So this is the terminology that Globus has chosen for how to describe a place with data in it. So there's endpoints that could have been set up by a facility that give you access to the big storage system they have, or there could be endpoints that are just collections of data that a group organization has published. And you can search and see what's in there. You probably want to know roughly what you're looking for. It's not like a Google search where you're going to find cat pictures in there, but you can find your facility and figure out what their preferred endpoint is. So there's two that I've got in this example. One is ALCF pound DTN theta. That is the endpoint that if you connect to it, you will see all your files on theta. So if you've got something on theta and you want to move somewhere, go to that endpoint. Another one that I'll talk about is ESNet read-only. They have a few of those. I've got one at Sunnyvale here, but those are just test endpoints. They have some files on it at different sizes. So if you want to just say, well, is Globus working? How fast is it? You can go there and copy those files somewhere and see what happens. Once you've found your endpoints, there's another tab you can go to called the File Manager. And this is what you use to kind of browse your files and move things around. I'll tell you a tip that's intuitive to me. If you go to it, you'll get one pane that shows you one site at a time. If you're trying to transfer between two sites, I like to see both at once. So you click the little button up there that gives you two panels. And one will be one endpoint, one will be the other. And then you can just highlight the file you want, click Start, and it'll move it to the other site. And that's, in a nutshell, that's all there is to it. It doesn't matter if that's a little file, it doesn't matter if that's a terabyte, it doesn't matter, it's just going to move it. And you have some options at the bottom you can click on, and I'll tell you what a few of these are. Some of them look like things you would see in a backup tool. You can just sync changed files. Maybe you have a directory that occasionally has bits and pieces of it changing, and you don't want to figure out just the ones that change. You can move a whole directory and click this button and say, just give me the things that are different now since last time I did this. You can have files deleted on the destination if they've disappeared from one side and you want to synchronize and have the same things disappear here. You can, usually when you transfer with Globus, the new file that lands will have a creation date of when it landed there, but you can tell it to keep the old creation date from where it came from. The one that's checked by default is verify integrity. So this means it's basically going to check some of your data on one end, move it, check some of it again, and see if it matches, so you know that you didn't have something get corrupted along the way. And you can encrypt if your data is super secret and you want to make sure nobody sees your super secret stuff. You can encrypt it. And once you've started a transfer, as you might expect, even though this network is really fast, if your data is big enough, it's going to take a while to get there. So you don't want to just stare at it until it arrives. They have a tab called Activity that just gives you notifications of your transfers and lets you know when they complete. So I've got two here. I did the same transfer a couple of times. And you can click on them and get details and see what it was that moved, how big it was, how fast it was, that sort of stuff. And I should mention, there's a lot of options for how to get those notifications that a transfer is completed. The default one is email. So you can go to the Activity tab and see, and you can go refresh that whenever you want to find out if your things have completed. But Globus by default will also just send you an email and say, hey, I completed that transfer you started. So you absolutely don't need to stay logged into the website. It's not helpful to do so. You can just start your transfer and log out, and it'll do its thing. If you want to, you can install a transfer agent on your laptop to make your laptop an endpoint on Globus. We're not going to go through that today because that depends on what kind of laptop you have. There's different transfer agents for Linux or Mac OS or Windows. You can also publish data sets. So let's say that you're part of an organization that's working on a scientific problem and you've come up with a critical data set that you want everyone to have access to. Maybe it's part of a report or whatever. You can publish that and make that have its own name and its own location that people can find regardless of the site that it's at, so that there's more of an endpoint for a given data set than there is for a computer, so to speak. So we do have some hands-on exercises for this. Unlike HPSS, anyone can use Globus, even with your guest accounts, or like I said, even on your laptop if you'd like. We have just one hands-on activity for Globus, mostly to kind of demonstrate it so you can try it, make sure it works for you. And all the hands-on exercise is going to do is take a file from one of the test endpoints and move it somewhere else. And we have a script in there that you can then run on that tool and it'll tell you a secret message. So if you run this hands-on exercise and get the secret message, come tell me about it. I'd love to hear if you got it to work and saw the message. So that's it for the data management tools. I'll ask if you have questions in a moment, but just to recap where we are on the kind of high-level agenda. So the first thing we want to do is just kind of concepts, tools that are available, kind of how to get started type stuff. We've done that. So we'll have a break here in a little bit, and then we'll come back and start talking about interfaces and libraries that you can use in your application. Just to remind you again, the reservation should be active now. I haven't checked it because I've been up here talking, but you should be able to run jobs and run hands-on exercises and play with some of these things if you'd like to. Look at the link on the top of the slides for information about that. That link has information about the reservation and about the exercises you can do. And so that's it for our early morning material. Do we have any questions about data management or really about any of the stuff I've talked about so far? Feel free.
So if you wanted to use Globus from like your home institution, is that something where the computing center has to set it up, or?
They don't. So the question, in case anyone didn't hear, is does your institution have to set up something to connect to Globus? And the short answer is no, they don't. The more complex answer is yes, they do if you wanted to go fast. So the reason that is I can tell you about what it's like at Argonne. You know, we have these parallel file systems, and what they've done is they've taken a set of nodes, I don't know how many, like 4 or 8, I don't know, and they run software that just do Globus transfers. So when you tell it to move something to Argonne, it connects to those servers that are dedicated to move things to the parallel file system, make it go faster and go in parallel. If you don't have that, then somehow, somewhere, it's going to go through a single node and be a little slower.
What does Globus do if doing this if it becomes full? Right?
I don't know. So maybe we can try and figure that out on a break. I'm not sure.
You showed the Globus, like, I guess it's like a web interface type thing, but there's just like a way to do it like from command line, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. So I would suggest if you want to get started in Globus, go and do your first transfer or whatever in the web interface and see it work, and then go to the scripting interface if you're going to be doing that repeatedly, right? Yep. All right. Thank you for your time, everyone. We think we've got a break for a little bit, and then we'll come back and get started on the I/O interfaces. Thank you.